Great. Well, welcome to Writing for Peace Sunday live lit readings. And tonight I'm just thrilled to have BK Loren here. And tonight's the first night that am hosting this myself. And I couldn't think of anybody that I'd rather have my first episode be with than my friend BK Loren. And let me read a short bio, an introduction to her. BK Loren is the award-winning author of the novel Theft and the essay collection Animal Mineral Radical. Her short fiction and essays have garnered many national awards and have been published in the best spiritual writing anthologies, Parabola, Yoga International, Orion Magazine, and many others. She is from a working-class family and has usually worked in jobs that allow space to write as she works. She's been a ranch hand, a cook for a gourmet catering service in New York City, a cook also in a cafe run by a reverend healer who cured people's ailments with a pendulum and herbs. She was also an aide on a locked psych ward, a tenured college teacher, and a furniture builder. She was extremely grateful for the chance to go to college, not a given, and she attended the University of Colorado in classics and philosophy, the University of New Mexico Lit, and the Iowa Writers Workshop Fiction. She feels that her varied experiences in other fields informs her writing as much as her schooling has. The publishing editor of her first book told her, "I wrote like she was raised by wolves." She tries to live up to that daily. So welcome, BK. I remember meeting you, 6 years ago when I first moved to Colorado. You and I were in a teacher's meeting and we were in the back of the class. And I just remember immediately being drawn to you and I think we just chatted the whole time and felt like we were catching up on decades or lifetimes. And so, and you just seem like such an authentic being, and you just, I just really am grateful that you're here tonight and really excited to talk about some important issues about writing as well as process and our responsibilities as writers. So thank you for being here. It's great to see you.
It's so good to see you. Yeah, we've always been connected, even before we met each other. So it's really nice to see you again. And I hope we see each other in person sometime.
I hope so too.
So I know that I'm going to start reading something in a bit, but before we do that, I want to talk about you a little bit. I was fortunate enough to read the first chapter of your book recently, and I loved it. And then I found out that Emily Rapp Black wrote this wonderful sort of mini review or blurb and about that book. And I would really like to read that if you don't mind.
Thank you.
I'm just going to take the time to do that. So this is what Emily Rapp Black says about the book that Brad is working on right now. And it is called Shiva's Blues, A Seeker's Journey. And this is what Emily says. In the age of toxic masculinity and mansplaining, in a country in which most violent crimes are committed by men, Brad Wetzler's Shiva Blues, a Seeker's Journey, offers a powerful, profound, and deeply personal roadmap for actively cultivating a different kind of manhood. As a young journalist in the 90s, Wetzler had it all: an amazing, enviable job as a travel and adventure journalist that sent him all over the world on assignments, a home in beautiful Santa Fe, a loving marriage. At the height of magazine journalism, Wetzler's passport was littered with stamps, and he edited and wrote features for high-profile magazines like the New York Times, George, National Geographic, and many others. He commissioned John Krakauer's piece about lost climbers of Mount Everest that later became the international best-selling book and hit movie Into Thin Air. But then the demons and trauma from his childhood caught up with him, and he sunk into a deep depression that increasing amounts of prescription drugs could not solve, and soon found himself divorced, essentially housebound, and physically unhealthy. He hit rock bottom with a friend who was on a similar cocktail of medication, died by suicide. Shiva Blues traces his road to recovery from a checkpoint in Palestine to the cave of a 100-year-old yogi in India. He kicks the drugs, finds yoga, moves to Colorado, and learns through the love of friends, animals, and a hard-won spiritual awakening that can't be put into any particular dogmatic box, to be a man that is not celebrated often enough, a man of wisdom, kindness, insight, tenderness, and sensitivity. Through energetic and lively prose, Wetzler takes us inside the heart and mind of a man who refuses to conform to society's restrictive notion of manhood, and instead presents a new path for men to walk. This is not an easy path, Wetzler is clear, but we have never needed it more. And we've never needed that book more than right now, Brad, so I can't wait to read it.
Well, and I can't wait to hear you read tonight from your latest essay, an award-winning essay, and I know it deals with toxic masculinity, and so much of this is, in the news right now, and as we prepare for the upcoming fight about the Supreme Court nomination, and so, yeah, it's an important topic, and I know it's going to come up tonight. So
that's the reason I want to read it, and as I get to the end, I think that sort of the last paragraph, although I wrote it long before the Supreme Court battle is going on right now, I really think that the last paragraph or two could be directed at what's going on, at Amy Coney Barrett in particular. And so I also want to say thank you to winning writers that gave me the award. I'm very pleased about that. And by the way, for aspiring writers, it's open again right now. The winning prize is $3,000, so not shabby. And they also give away, I think, at least several $200 awards also. So keep your eyes open for that and enter it. It's a really fine organization. So here we go. I'm going to read, Sir, may I have a pack of Marlboros? I'm standing in the threshold wearing a tank top and torn boxers, my hands gripping the top of the doorway. I arch my body forward like a bow and arrow when I talk. I don't even like women, I tell her. They bug me. Even when I was a kid, I never liked girls. My body is lean and muscled, the elastic of my boxers stretching like a bridge across my hip bones. I'm not a lesbian. She is some kind of beauty queen. I mean, her mother used to enter her into beauty pageants. My mother never entered me into pageants. I was always too muddy, too skinned up to be put on display. But Sonny, she has delicate features and silky dark hair. Her eyes have this way about them. They're quiet, confident. The man I'm going to marry calls her beautiful Sonny, never just Sonny. He lets me know that he'd be with her if he could, but he's short and she's tall, and to him, that's the end of the equation. The equation is a little less clear. As I state my disavowal of women to Sonny, we've just gotten out of bed together. We were not sleeping. I watch her dress, and she flashes me a sidelong glance of disbelief. Listen to yourself, she says, and brushes past me in the doorway. A few days later, I'm with David. We walk into the bedroom, and there's a broken wine glass on our bed. Under the shards, stained with red, is a book by Adrienne Rich. The title refracts through glass. A wild patience has taken me this far. Sonny has been here, in this house, in this room. When I was a kid, I was a martial artist. Because martial arts was not popular back then, I was the only girl in most classes. I fought men. Often, I won. When I was done, I heard people whisper, "Wow, what a dyke." I was 12. I didn't know what the word meant. I thought they were calling me a dick. Before the day I declared my dislike of women, David, Sonny, and I shared the kind of friendship you have in college. You live together, become a family. You stay up until midnight, becomes dawn, talking about all the ways you're going to shake up the known world, make it a better place. You philosophize, you dream. The three of us had that kind of friendship, intense, intellectual, intimate. Sonny and I also had the quintessential girl-to-girl friendship that blooms in college. We talked about the boys Sonny dated and about my relationship with David. Then came the tectonic shift. It was winter, snowing for 3 days. David was out of town, and by mid-morning, I was still in bed, swallowed in that sweet liminal space between dreaming and waking, when Sonny knocked on my door. My eyes opened halfway. "Come in," I said. She opened the door, stood there, her fingers close to her mouth, fidgeting. Want to go to breakfast? I shook my head, no. Too cozy in bed, son. I pulled the blankets tighter. She remained in the doorway, fingers still fidgeting. I have to tell you something. So tell me now. She shook her head. No, not in the house. No way, not in this house. Not in the house? What the hell did that mean? She said it with exaggerated conviction. It was part of her odd preoccupation, a recent change in her. Still, she had me hooked. What words could possibly have been so impossible to utter in this house, especially on a snowy morning when neither one of us had a reason to step outside? When we did step outside, I really began to question her. Sleet slapped my cheeks. It was so slick that Sonia and I had to clutch each other's arms and waddle so we didn't fall. This is fun, I told her. Come on, you're tough. It's nothing. She suggested I keep my mind on the hot coffee and omelets waiting for us at the college cafe. It's cozy there too, she said. She was wearing this long wool coat that made her seem simultaneously more sophisticated, like some highbrow artist from New York, and more scary. It fell around her shoulders like a black cape. In the weeks leading up to this day, she'd been critical, distant, even mean, one of the first obstacles in our friendship. I began to think of her as utter darkness, something shadowy and nondescript. We walked under amber street lamps, the sun struggling through haze. In 30 minutes, we walked less than a mile, and during that time, something happened. We began to laugh, to tell stories, to finish each other's sentences like we used to. She said, "Remember that time in the UMC when we crashed the Springsteen display?" She nodded. We'd spent many days pumping our working class fists to Springsteen's lyrics. So when the Young Republicans put up a display in the student union celebrating Springsteen's Born in the USA as a paean to war, we could barely stand it. And so late one night when the UMC was nearly empty, we wrote Bruce lyrics on construction paper and plastered them all over the misguided sentiments. When a janitor saw us, we ran like bandits, leapt over a wall, crouched low and huddled together, our hearts slamming our chests, our bodies close and afraid. As we walked in the snow that morning, we laughed about our prank. Was there really a janitor chasing us, I asked, or did we just freak out? I think he was real, she said. We laughed ourselves to tears. Just before we reached the greasy spoon, she turned to me and the scowl of worry darkened her face again. I'm scared, she said. Of what? It was below zero and I was losing my patience. I have something to tell you. So tell me, it's fine, just tell me. Okay, she said it like she was steeling herself against some horrible news. She gritted her teeth and began to speak. And just then I let go of the crook of her arm to open the door. The ice was slicker than we both imagined, and our feet skated to catch our balance. We laughed, and then Sonny went down, hard. Still laughing, I stretched out my hand to help her up. She shook her head no, grimaced in pain. Later that afternoon, I visited her in the hospital where she'd had surgery to put a steel shank on the broken bones in her leg. I sat at the end of her bed, my hand resting on her cast. Jesus Christ, I can't believe it. Yeah, pretty shitty, she said and shrugged. So is David home yet? I looked at my watch. Yeah, he should be home by now. I had brought her a stupid wind-up toy, a tiger that balanced on a ball, then flipped and landed upright again. I wound the screw, let the tiger flip, then did it again. So what were you going to tell me? I asked. Tiger flipped, landed, flipped, landed. I wound the key tight over and over, waiting. Eventually, she said, David's home. You should leave now. In high school, I was known for three things. My goal in life was to fake my way into a mental hospital. I believed I'd be happy there. In the outside world, I felt straitjacketed. 2, I was imperturbable. I'd learned this from years of study in martial arts. People would try to make me angry. They'd throw fake punches at me. I'd dodge and never show an emotion. 3, I didn't like guys. That was my mantra. I don't like guys. No one ever questioned me until one day, Bobby Rossi asked me out on a date, and I said, no, thanks, I don't like guys. And Bobby said, well, then what do you like? And I thought of the possibilities. Birds, mountains, drawing, martial arts, quiet days on the ocean when I ditched school, Carole King, James Taylor, Jimi Hendrix. Other than that, I had no idea what the answer could possibly be. Before winter break ended, David went out of town again. That afternoon, Sonny clunked into my bedroom, full cast on her leg, and said, "I want to take you to dinner." Deja vu. She fingered her mouth nervously and said she had something to tell me outside of this house. The mystery had become a tick digging under my skin. I wanted to flick it off, but its tiny pincers had taken hold. So the three of us, me, Sonny, and the massive white cast on Sonny's left leg, clunked up the stairs to the Rio Grande Cafe. We had barely been given menus before Sonny said, "I have to say, I don't want anything from you. I just need you to listen." Oh, Jesus, really? Here we go again with the drama. I struggled not to roll my eyes. I ordered a margarita. Sonny drew in a huge breath, started to speak, and I took a huge gulp of tequila because whatever she had been waiting weeks to tell me was finally on the tip of her tongue. "Okay," she said. I leaned in. "You're not in love with David." I forced myself to maintain eye contact, sipped my margarita, puckered from the salt and lime, and she added, "You're in love with me." My eyes went droopy. I was suddenly emotionally exhausted, and I think I muttered something to the effect of, "Oh, yes, this is very interesting. Please do tell me your theory because I do want to hear everything that you have to say. And I have a very open mind, and I'm a progressive, forward-thinking liberal who has crawled my way out of a regressive, backward-thinking redneck family. And so I want you to know that if you're a lesbian, I fully support you. And I can't wait to get home to David." She then methodically replayed all the times when I had proven this love to her. That time in the bar when the guys wouldn't leave us alone, and I wanted them to think we were lovers. So, as a defense against their advances, I leaned forward to kiss her. I stopped just short when the guys began to holler with disgust. That time in our home when David was not there and we were laughing, when we brushed shoulders and our lips got a little too close. That time, those several times when David was trying to talk to me, but I could not stop looking at her. Halfway through her litany, a waiter passed and I waved him down. "Sir, could I get a pack of cigarettes?" "What kind?" he asked. I envisioned the tough guy on the horse. I needed him now. "Marlboro," I said. Up until this exact moment in time, I did not smoke. A few seconds later, the server was back. I opened the package, lit a cigarette, inhaled, and looked back at Sonny with my completely open mind. I was 18 years old. Melissa was 22. We shared an apartment. I had helped her through a relationship with a guy who had physically abused her. I was teaching her the self-defense aspects of martial arts. It was the 1970s. There were no safe houses in the state of Colorado. Melissa and I didn't have the money for an apartment with bedrooms, so we shoved 2 beds into a studio, made them look like an L-shaped sectional, and called it home. Then one night, I was taking a chicken casserole out of the oven when I turned and ran smack dab into Melissa. I bobbled the casserole dish. She helped me steady it to the counter, but we got tangled up, my hands on her shoulders, her hands on my hips. We stood there, face to face. A few seconds passed. Then Melissa said, "Sometimes I think I could kiss you." And I said, "Would you like some chicken casserole?" They say sucking cigarettes is sexual sublimation. I sublimated a whole pack of Marlboros as Sonny talked. My throat felt like it had been scrubbed with steel wool. She talked. I smoked. I drank. I rested my chin on my twisted up arms. I wanted to fall asleep. I was beyond exhausted. 2 hours later, when she was finally done talking, my energy returned. "Okay, ready? Let's go," I said. We walked down the stairs together, Sonny leaning on one crutch and the banister. "So what do you want to do?" she asked. Dinner was over. It seemed obvious. "I want to go home." "Well, David will be home tomorrow," she said. Another obvious thing. "Yeah, so I'll pick him up." "That's what you want?" "Yeah, that's what I want." When we reached the car, one of those trashed out boat-like Buicks parents handed down to their kids in the 1980s, I had to help her and her cast into the driver's seat. I took her crutches. I leaned them against the back door, and she rested her hand on my shoulder for stability. She rested her hand on my shoulder. I was a martial artist precisely for this reason. The body needs defending. What touches the body makes an immediate impact on the soul. The body is fragile, the thing that holds the heart, the mind, the spirit. The body is the object of us, the thing that cannot be abstracted, the thing that cannot lie, the thing that finally broke down and made me give in to whatever I'd been fighting for years. She rested her hand on my shoulder. I was a kid again. I felt my body sweating, training, sparring, winning, and I heard the whispers, she's a dyke. And I didn't want to be that, whatever that was. I wanted to fight against it, the thing that diminished my power and took away the fact that I had won over and over, fair and square. I had won, and it did not matter because I was a dyke. I felt the social straitjacket of high school. Then what do you like? And my utter silence that followed. And I watched my heart become something I could not fathom, could not see, name, hold, could not love. She rested her hand on my shoulder. There was the possibility of love. There was the possibility that I did not have to fight, that I could be me, whatever the fuck that was, because it had been lost beneath 2 decades of what? Not lies, not deception, not denial, because I would have had to have been able to name the thing in order to deny it. It didn't even have a word for the mechanism that had kept me from naming the unnameable thing that was smothering me. She rested her hand on my shoulder. She saw my body soften for the first time ever. She said, my parents have a cabin in the mountains. We can go there if you like. My voice was shaking. I said, drive. I called David the next day. I told him I was spending the weekend with Sani. Beautiful Sani, he said. Yes, beautiful Sani. I came back a few days later with bits of Sani's cast embedded in my face, my hands, my legs, my body. I came back with the thing that was healing her bones embedded in my skin. I hoped those specks might sink into my bones, do some kind of healing of my own, something deeper than I could fathom. I came back and I said, David, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I did not even know there was an option, because there wasn't. Among the many books Sani gave me to read that weekend was one called Compulsory Heterosexuality by Adrienne Rich. It explained why the word dyke scared me. It peeled back layers of culture, violence, and oppression and revealed a whole new color wheel of possibilities, of truths, of ways to live my life with integrity. I'd spent my college days studying Greek, Latin, physics, anything that might prove a recovering redneck like me belonged in a university. Sani spent her college career learning about the various forms of oppression in our culture. One of the oppressions that we, right then, were both coming face to face with for the first time. When we were up at the cabin, she also showed me a story she had written. We both hoped to become writers someday. It was a vaguely fictionalized version of our lives over the past few months. In it, the main character's mother asked her why she had chosen to be with women. The main character's reply, the only choice I'm making is whether or not to live an honest life. There's a question of choice going around these days, the hot topic that allows others to define my life. Let me simplify it. Who I love is not a matter of politics or biology. It's a matter of the human heart. I do not have any more choice over who I love than you do. As Andrew Solomon has said, we don't allow freedom of religion because Jews can't help being Jewish. We grant it because we believe in the value of self-determination. The relationship I shared with Sani never really ironed itself out. We had both crossed a threshold together, an unbreakable bond, even across time, distance, and silence. We moved on from one another, dated other women. It's 35 years later as I write this. I've been with the love of my life for 31 years now. And because love is a fluid thing that blooms in different ways at different times in different people, Sani has been with the love of her life for decades too, a good man that I know and care for. Sometime last month, Sani and I talked comfortably for the first time in decades. We didn't pump our fists to Springsteen, but the bond we once had was still there. Because yes, we had, in our own ways, shaken up the known world, or at least we'd shaken up our known world. We had made a difference. We had made the choice to live honestly. 30 years later, I finally understand that woman standing in the doorway in the wife beater tank top, arching her body like a weapon and declaring to Sonny, I don't even like women. I'm not a lesbian. I understand because I am still her, with that kernel of self-hatred lodged in my bones. The anger that rises, the frustration that still sometimes blocks me from who I am. Because in some way, we are all that woman. We live in a world that, like me 3 decades ago, hates women and does not even know why. I am, also no longer that woman. Because one night, Sonny had the guts to say what she felt, and because I finally had the courage to step out of the ring and into a fight worth fighting, one that would eventually give me peace. A wild patience had truly taken me that far. As Adrienne Rich wrote in the book of poems refracted through broken glass on my bed so long ago, I can never romanticize language again, never deny its power for disguise, for mystification. But the same could be said for music or any form created. Painted ceilings, beaten worm-worn pietas, organizing victimization, frescoes translating violence into patterns so powerful and pure, we continually fail to ask, are they true for us? What is true for me? I wake in the mornings and I see Lisa sleeping next to me, and I know I'm home. This is not a privilege granted to me with ease. This is a hard-won right that has come to me over time, something I know more than I know even my own collective history, my own roots, which in the past had become, even to me, a lie. Don't ask me to lie anymore. This is what I know. This is where I come from. This is where I belong. Lisa and I walk our dogs in the saffron light of dawn. We plant tulips in autumn and watch them bloom in spring. The cycle repeats, and it is never repetitive. This love renews. This love stays. This love is not yours to name. There is nothing I know more than this. Thank you.
BK. Well, so many.
I do have one thing that I want to say. That was published first in a book called Greetings from Janeland, and the wonderful editor Candace Walsh actually commissioned me to write it, asked me to write it. So I want to say thank you to her as well.
When was that piece written, BK?
About 2 years ago now.
So many questions come up for me. And by the way, if you'd like to ask a question, feel free to type into the chat, and I'll forward them to BK. And if there's time, we can perhaps open up the audience to ask live questions. But that was a really beautiful reading, and I have some things to get to. So, gosh, one of the things as I was preparing for tonight, BK, that comes up when people talk about your writing is just how words matter, and how that's something, an idea that is important to you, and it's important to all people who write, I guess. But can you talk a little bit about how you write words that matter? I mean, writing is a solitary thing. There might be some political things you're trying to connect with, but you also have the obligation to tell a story. Can you talk about the creative process in writing words that matter, and maybe go a little bit deeper into why that's so important to you?
Well, I've always thought that writing is more than having something to say. Writing is listening, and I've said that several times too. Whenever I teach a class, I say that whenever I'm trying to say something, I'm getting it wrong. I'm skating on the surface, and then at one point, I just give up and I start to listen to what needs to be said rather than what I want to say, and I put my ego aside. And so, like, for instance, with that essay, I took 4 or 5 stabs at it first, and they all were just stories, and so it's this whittling away that happens where I'm I'm trying and I'm trying and I'm trying to get to something. And then I sort of get a little bit mad at myself or frustrated with myself for digging and hitting things so hard. And I let go. The minute I let go, the essay usually comes to me. That essay was written with very few changes. So can I say it's a first draft? Kind of. That particular essay came all at once, but I took 4 or 5 stabs at it first, and they were all things where my ego got in the way, where my the idea of what I thought I wanted to say got in the way. And then as soon as I get frustrated with that, and as soon as I let go, I just sit back and I listen. I think Philip Roth said that in his fiction, he waits until whatever he's writing feels like a memory rather than like something he created. And I think that memoirists are creating, and I think we have to wait till it feels like a memory again, like we're experiencing it, rather than, I never feel like I'm writing anything. I feel like I'm experiencing it.
Beautiful. Couple of comments that just came in. So happy to hear BK and hear your own voice read your words. Will be forever in my head and heart. This essay feels so important for all of us in this moment. Leah wrote that. And another comment. You have such a strong writer's voice. How does a writer develop a strong, distinctive voice in their area? Some practical advice from Anne.
First of all, I want to say thank you to Leah and say that Leah has a chapbook out, and I can't wait to read it. Wonderful writer as well. As for developing a voice, I'm going to go back to that listening thing and say, here, I'm just going to read a paragraph that's the introduction to my book, Animal, Mineral, Radical. And I'm just going to read this. I'm not copying out. I'll read this and then I'll talk about it. Please. Writing is listening. I have never believed that writing has anything to do with having something to say. It has always come to me as listening. It's a little like prayer, I imagine, though I've never leaned toward any religion. But I've been told that in prayer, there is a moment of asking for something, and then there's a longer period devoted to waiting. The waiting in and of itself decreases the desperation and the desire. In it, already there's a giving up. It throws a person into a state of listening, and I would guess the person who asked in the form of prayer begins to see and hear things that make sense in ways that hadn't before the asking. In the aftermath, the ragged beauty and reason of everyday life become more lucid. This, to me, is the same process as writing. It is a letting go. That's all I can say. It is not driving anything. It is an absolute letting go, and then seeing what comes and not being afraid of what comes. We can't.
How do you balance that letting go, BK, with one of the things we've talking about tonight is sort of a writer's responsibility, especially in difficult times. And so how do you balance those two, the letting go, the letting the creative process work, but also, having that responsibility and owning it?
So the responsibility comes, I think, in the revision. So there's a difference between the composition and the revision. And when I go back in, I want to be sure that what I've said is accurate, real, and actually will make an impact on the world that is positive in some way, or if not positive, because things that are whole are positive and negative. And so I want it to be as honest as it can possibly be. And honesty is something that we certainly don't have a lot of in the world right now. And so that to me is the responsibility, the social responsibility of a writer, is to try to get to that honest point. And I do think that honest point has to do with letting go. We can see that in our politicians right now. They definitely want to drive a point and they don't let go. And so what comes out of their mouths is often has nothing to do with the truth and impacts society in a terribly negative way. And so again, I think it does have to do with the letting go of the ego, but then also being able to have the scrutiny and the discipline of an artist. to say, I want to shape it in this way, and I want it to be, I want it to affect people in a way that will allow them to find their own truth within it. Not my truth, but their own truth within it. And I hope that, I feel that that is my social responsibility.
Talk about faith and how do you keep the faith in a time when, you know, words seem to be getting cheaper and cheaper on some, you know, level of social media anyway, and, you know, the fake news phenomenon, and seems like, you know, words are increasingly, the appearance is that they don't matter as much. And so how do you keep the faith as a writer, as an artist, as a person whose voice is important to be heard?
I want to go back to my intro again, because I talk about that a lot in that intro to this. I want to read something that the magazine N+1 wrote, and I quote them here. It says, all contemporary publications tend toward the condition of blogs, and soon, if not yet already, it will seem pretentious, elitist, and old-fashioned to write anything, anywhere, with patience and care. And so I think that's the place. I think N+1 magazine, which is a magazine I love a lot, nailed that. But I think that there are plenty of writers. Let me say this. I think there are more of us than them. Mm. And I think that the people who care, every writer that I know puts words on the page with a precision and a care and a passion and a compassion that is beyond me. Every writer I know does that. I don't know where they're pulling the other writers from, but they're getting a lot of attention right now. And I think it's death throes. I hope it's death throes. And I think that we're going to flip back around. And so I keep the faith because it's the only thing I know. It's the only thing I know that has always mattered to me from the time I was in second grade, is when I first realized that words mattered to me. I wrote a poem. I wrote a book of poems every week with my allowance money. And at the end of the week, I buried the book of poems in my backyard. And I have a tendency to want to go, dig them up right now and see what they say. But there's another part of me that thinks that even when I was in second grade, did I say 2 years old or second grade? I meant second grade if I said 2 years old. Even when I was in second grade, I think I kind of thought that if I planted the words, they might grow. And I've never lost that faith. Mm-hmm. And most of the writers I know haven't, but there's a lot of attention being given to other kinds of writers, and that's fine. I think it'll pass.
Hillary writes, where's your backyard? Who wants to go with me?
Zenobia Court, Westminster.
I know there's several writers here tonight, if not more, if not almost everybody. Two process questions for you. One, do you think about the reader when you write? Tell me about that.
Absolutely, I think about the reader, and I think it gets overlooked a lot. I think that there is a false sort of pretense that we write for ourselves. I write to communicate. I love people. I love my species. I want a conversation. I desperately want a conversation that's real and that matters. And so when I sit down to write, I always think of who I'm writing to. I know that as a collective, and I have a sense of it as a collective. And then there are a few people who I keep in mind. One happens to be in the room right now, who I will go unmentioned, but she knows who she is. And so I really think the space between the reader and the writer is an extremely vibrant and important place that really needs to be valued by writers and really looked at. And so, yeah, I always think about audience. I never have the illusion that I'm writing only for me, because who am I?
Yeah. Curious, who do you write for when you write, or do you? I once heard a famous editor say that, his piece of advice was to write for a few good voices in your head, a few people you admire, writers, friends, lovers, whatever. But who do you write for?
A conglomeration of those. For Lisa, who you heard, she's just a very, very good reader and a very good listener. I have another friend who's a very good listener and a very good reader by the name of Doreen, and I think of her a lot when I write. Brad, sometimes I have thought of you as I've written. It changes. Honestly, I think that every person who I meet at some point in time enters it depends on what I'm writing. But I see different people for different things. But I have a few mainstays, and those are the people closest to me. Dennis, a writer I love, and I can't remember his last name. Tree of Smoke.
Johnson.
What?
Johnson.
Yeah, Dennis. Yeah. Said that he wrote for his agent. Oh, he must have had such a wonderful agent. He said that she was the only person that he wrote for. But I do think that you need that space between. I think that a writer needs the space between, and whoever you find to write for, hang on to it. And I think it's going to change with each piece that you write, but hang on to it and write for that person, because that space between is vibrant.
Would you read something else for us now?
You bet. Yeah. I will read a closing piece, which I never read this, but I have this urge to read it right now. So let me find it. This I wrote as a journal entry. And I don't know what prompted me to write it, but I wrote it as a journal entry many, many, many years ago. And it was published in Parabola, and then eventually was recognized in the Best Spiritual Writing Anthology. But it's just a couple of pages, so I'm just going to read that. It's called Backwards. I would like to be a fool, a raven, a coyote, a man whose body is painted in wide bands of alternating black and white, my face like a zebra's, my body a totem. I would be particularly foolish should I become such a man, because as I sit here today, I am a woman. But fools do things backwards. The lines between man and woman, animal and human, heaven and earth, not so clearly delineated as they are for us, the rational ones, whose bodies are all one color. I would like to be a fool. I would like to wash my hands in dirt, feel the cool brown earth cleanse me of my sorrows, my pride, my arrogance, and of the belief that cleanliness is next to godliness, when God is most likely dirt, the gritty transformation, my hands like a seed in that solid darkness, like the roots of a tree, all creation beginning beneath the surface. I would like to dry off with water, to be constantly warm in that submersion, the water pressing my body close, a constant fluidity. I could not escape, my skin breathing like gills, the substance of life folding around me. I would like to step in the same river once. I would like to learn from the water, the way it penetrates without force, the way it wears away all that is solid, stubborn, immutable, the way it understands time, the way it ticks ahead constantly without praying for immortality, the way they are full at every moment, though we see them rise and fall. Let me see, rivers. Yeah, okay, sorry. The way we see them rise and fall, the way water connects islands without destroying solitude, the subtle connections between the silence of water. I'd like to be a fool. I'd like to walk backwards, never forward. I would still reach new places, my movement always ahead, but my eyes cast behind me so that I might see where I have been, where I have come from, the troubles that have beset my course of action, the reasons I have had for celebration, for sorrow, for gratitude, for gratitude, my history, the collective history from which I have emerged and which I am still creating. I would like to keep my eyes always on these things, because looking back, there was always something substantial. Looking ahead, there is an emptiness I cannot help but want to fill. But oh, the more richly I might fill it with the knowledge of what has come before. Living in the present is overrated. It is walking with the rhythm of the past in your bones that matters. The fool lives in the past and is forever in the moment. A Zen mistake, a clock without a battery, its hands spread open to either side of noon. I would like to be a fool. I would like to say hello when I am leaving, goodbye when I am coming. In this manner, I would remember from the beginning the potential for loss, and so I might learn to treasure before losing as I bid farewell. I would remember the potential for return, all things circling as they do, into something like fullness, small moments of completion that weave together, like Penelope's cloth, doing and undoing themselves by turn, an unfinished pattern that guides a weary traveler home. As when Athena says to Odysseus, keep the unnameable word in your heart, and the man, poor rational hero, remains adrift for yet another decade, trying to speak what could not be spoken, the words in his heart, his home, the journey at hand, his home. I would like to be a fool, to keep the unnameable word in my heart, to speak in silence to speak, to move in stillness, to be still in movement, to end at the beginning, to begin at the end. I would like to be a fool.
Thank you. Wow. I know you write about a wide range of topics, but I also know that you keep coming back to nature too as a topic to write about. I read recently the beauty of natural words like twig, raven, pool, puddle. I mean, there's no harm. Those words lack the ability to harm. It was the quote I read. I'll have to dig that out. Unlike, big Latinate words where we can harm with them. When you talk about maybe the role of nature in your life and in your writing as a way to ground, or how it serves you, how you keep coming back to it.
I've struggled with that so much recently because, we're theoretically in the Anthropocene right now. And there are many writers who I admire who will argue that nature no longer exists, that everything has been, it depends on how you define nature. And everything has been manipulated. There's not any part of the ocean or the sky, nothing that has not been manipulated by this very selfish species that we are. And so I struggle with that so much recently. And I look at the way that animals are adapting. Like I learned recently that pigeons have darker wings. There's been a study done. Pigeons have darker wings in the city because their body has learned to process heavy metals out through their feathers. So their blood processes these heavy metals out through their feathers. And so I wonder what we're becoming. I wonder what we're becoming. I wonder how we're adapting to that. And then I wonder, rather than there being no nature left, isn't everything nature? And so I don't know. I think that the reason I keep coming back to nature is because I struggle with it so much, to understand it, to understand it, to understand the role that it has played in my life, and that it plays in everybody's life. It is the never-ending thing that I will never understand. So that's why I keep coming back to it. I feel great in nature. However, I'm not a person who has to walk into the wilderness for miles and miles and miles to get to nature. I walk outside and see a bird, and I'm in nature. And I love that a lot of like I talk about coyotes a lot, and they're urban by now. They have learned to live in cities. Animals are learning to live in cities, and so I think maybe what I love about it is it's just resilient, and it makes us so small. We think we're so big, and it makes us so small. We think the world's going to end soon. No, we're going to end. Nature's going to keep going. So I think that's why I keep coming back to it.
Another question. So I often feel the last few months that I'm suspended in time a bit, like the scene in your essay in the hospital, watching the tiger flip over and over on the sphere, waiting for answers. How do we write through these times?
Well, I'm not being flip. I'm not using a pun there, but how do we write through these times? We put a pen to the page and we let the words come out regardless of all the bullshit that's going on around us. You know, we just, that is what we are here for. And it is what gives us meaning and will lend meaning to other people's lives. And so to not do that, that is to not do your purpose, and that is your purpose. That's I don't know. You can't let them win. You have to keep writing. You can't let them win. You know, I mean, so how do you do it? Just physically put the pen to the paper and start to write, and something will come out. I promise you. And whatever comes out is going to be more powerful than anything they have. It just is. But you got to sit there and you got to do it, because they're trying to jumble your mind and they're trying to jumble your heart and they're trying to take all that away. So I say, don't let them. Right. It's more essential now than ever. And it's hard. But here's the news. It's always been hard. It's always been hard.
One of the odd things about this pandemic time for me is, in some ways, I mean, with admitting the limitations of Zoom, but I've found myself sometimes even feeling more connected. And it sounds a bit counterintuitive. But can you talk about community and writing? And is it something that's important to you, or do you tend to be more purely solitary? Speak about that.
Well, I'm pretty solitary about my writing, but I'm extremely, I call myself a gregarious introvert. And so I love talking to people, and I love that sort of connection. I miss that sort of connection during COVID. I really miss that sort of connection during COVID. Mm. I am wary of two-dimensional connections a little bit. And yet I think that if we look at it the right way, that it can bring us all together. And I think it has brought us all together in a big way. And I think we're probably going to see that on November 3rd. But I think that we are a powerful force. And but about my writing, I don't tend to talk about it. I don't tend to, and this is just me. I don't tend to go to writing groups or share much of my work. That's just my process, and I think I'm unusual in that. But it's always been very, it's always been something that I've buried in my backyard and waited to see if it would grow on its own.
We just have a few more minutes. I'm wondering, I'm kind of putting you on the spot. If there's something you'd like to close with, I think we already kind of shared your closing reading, but do you have anything at your fingertips there that you might read that feels good right now?
Let me, might want to, since people have been asking about this, I might want to finish up with from the introduction of Animal, Mineral, Radical. I know it's very strange to read from an introduction, but it addresses some of the things that we've talked about tonight. And so the first part of it is the part where I talked about that writing is like a prayer. And then I leap over to the N+1 quote that all contemporary publications tend toward the condition of blogs, and soon, if not yet already, it will seem pretentious, elitist, and old-fashioned to write anything, anywhere with patience and care. And then I'm going to flip over from there. I am keenly aware that as a writer, I am not an anomaly. Most, if not all, working writers take care and patience with their words. But for every careful sentence that a writer labors over into the wee hours of the morning, there is also a professed cultural value for that which is quick, off the cuff, and uncrafted. If the editors of N+1 are right, and soon, if not yet already, it will seem pretentious, elitist, and old-fashioned to write anything, anywhere with patience and care, then I hope that this book offers a pretentious, elitist, veritable fossil of a book. But smart and prodigious as their words may be, I think, or maybe I hope, they'll turn out to be wrong. No doubt we as a species have waged and are waging war on the natural world. For the sake of our survival and that of other living beings, I hope we stop soon. But in the realm of geologic time, the natural world will continue. It will survive with or without us. We are currently waging war on language and literature, a term used fondly in the past and disparagingly these days, implying, as N+1 says, elitism. But human trends don't wax and wane in the same protracted time as geology. And I believe in the power of language in the way that I believe in the power of the earth. It will survive. Trite and old-fashioned as it may sound, the human heart will always need words and works of all kinds, shaped with care and patience, both of which breed compassion. That's what I hope to offer in the pages that follow.
Wow, thank you, BK.
And what I hope to offer to everybody here tonight is keep the compassion alive.
Great. Well, wonderful. Well, our hour's up, and thank you for being here, BK. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, everyone.
It's been a beautiful night. Thanks for sharing so deeply about your practice and your writing and your thinking. And yeah, I look forward to having that beer sometime with you that we've been talking about for a while. So thank you, everybody. So we'll see you next week. We have David Barton, who's going to be reading from his new biography of Václav Havel. And then we've got a full November coming up, and I'll reveal more about that in the coming days. So great to see everybody. Thank you for being here, and be well, stay safe. Well, thank you. Yeah. Good night.
Thank you everyone for coming. So good.
Wonderful reading evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.